Taiwan is on the verge of a major energy transition as it prepares to phase out nuclear power in May this year. Well, the move has sparked a debate about the island's long-term energy security. CNA's Victoria Jian takes a look at the history and current state of Taiwan's nuclear energy policy.
Taiwan built its first nuclear power plant in 1978 in the wake of the global oil crisis. Due to the lack of domestic energy resources and a heavy reliance on imports, nuclear energy was at the time regarded as a reliable and cost-effective solution. 3 nuclear power plants were built and became operational between 1978 and 1985. At one point, nuclear power accounted for 32% of Taiwan's energy mix. But nuclear power became an increasingly controversial issue, especially after the island's democratization in the 1980s. The plan for a 4th nuclear power plant was set in motion in 1980. However, its construction coincided with the Chernobyl accident in 1986 and the 2011 Fukushima nuclear accident in Japan. The strong opposition from local residents and the Democratic Progressive Party led to the suspension of the project in 2014. Although a referendum in 2018 showed a majority of voters supported nuclear power as a form of supplementary green energy, another vote that took place in 2021 concluded that the number 4 nuclear power plant would not be revived. The phasing out of nuclear power in Taiwan began in 2016 when Tsai Ing-wen took office as president, marking the start of the DPP's historic 3-term streak in power. Now, under William Lai's watch, the DPP will oversee the decommissioning of Taiwan's last nuclear power plant on May 17th, thus realizing its nuclear-free homeland vision after a 4-decade struggle.
For more on this, we are joined now by our Taiwan correspondent Victoria Jian, who is based in Taipei. Vic, so we know that Taiwan will be phasing out its nuclear power in May, but nuclear power currently supplies just about 5% of the island's energy needs. So why does it matter?
Well, 5% may not sound like much, but nuclear power has played a key role as a stable and low-carbon source of energy, especially during peak demand or emergencies. It's also one of the few non-fossil fuel sources that can run 24/7, unlike solar or wind, which depend on the weather. Now, getting rid of nuclear power also means Taiwan will have to rely even more on fossil fuels in the short term. That would make it difficult for Taiwan to cut carbon emission and achieve its net zero target by 2050. Another major concern is that renewables are not scaling up fast enough to fill the gap. Taiwan's renewable energy only accounts for 10% of its total energy, falling behind its target of 20% by 2025. Now, under the circumstances, analysts say to completely replace nuclear power with renewable energy is unlikely. I spoke to an energy expert, and here's what he has to say.
我们97%的能源是要从国外进口，那么你由地下人口要搞再生能源有它的限制。8年的试验已经知道你不可行，问题那么严重，返回使用核电是唯一的出路了。核电不延役，不再发展核电厂，你无解，除非你的电力不成长。那电力呢？因为 AI 的关系，那台湾的未来的电力的成长是比过去8年的成长率大概接近要增加1倍。
So while 5% may sound small, it's the kind of 5% that can make a big difference during tight energy conditions. And with nuclear gone, Taiwan's energy puzzle just got a whole lot more complicated.
Okay, so I hear what you're saying. The 5% is very important during critical periods. But what about the reaction we're getting from the public, public and private sector, though? I mean, regarding the complete phase out of nuclear power. I mean, have they wrapped their heads around it?
A recent poll reveals that more than 70% of the public now support extending the use of nuclear power, a dramatic shift from more than a decade ago, because back then, safety fears after the 2011 Fukushima disaster in Japan fueled strong anti-nuclear sentiment. But today, growing concerns over power shortages, rising energy prices, and climate change are clearly changing minds. Many Taiwanese are now questioning whether phasing out a stable, low-carbon energy source is the right move, especially when renewables like solar and wind still make up a small portion of the island's energy mix. I spoke to some people on the street, and here's what they have to say.
感觉是世界的趋势吧。我觉得好像现在欧洲那边有一些国家也都是继续要用核能的。我觉得感觉不用也没办法。对，
我应该会赞成沿用核能，因为毕竟目前可以替代的能源还太少了。那核能它其实是虽然有污染的环境问题，但是它的能源的发电是稳定的。我觉得这是一个过桥的一个机制吧。目前还没有办法说完全用干净能源来做取代。
台湾岛太小了，那如果核电厂有什么样的问题的话，变成是说可能整个台湾都会影响到，对吧？所以说觉得说在这么密集的地方盖这么多的核电厂是比较不好的。
Now, in the business world, the mood is even more urgent. Taiwan's energy-hungry industries, especially in semiconductors and manufacturing, are sounding the alarm. Leaders like Tong Zhenxian, founder of Pegatron, have openly supported nuclear power. He said nuclear energy is very important to Taiwan. Its power generation is relatively stable, and it's economical, and it helps with energy resilience. Now, while the government remains committed to a nuclear-free future, the rising public support for nuclear energy and the mounting pressure from business could force a rethinking of Taiwan's energy strategy.
And Vic, I mean, when we talk about Taiwan, we have to talk about TSMC, and obviously there are concerns about operation disruptions because of power shortages. I mean, that obviously could be disastrous to the global supply chain. Help us understand this. Is there a real risk of TSMC not having enough power to sustain its growth?
Well, right now, TSMC accounts for about 8% of Taiwan's total electricity consumption, which is a massive share considering Taiwan's total energy usage. The S&P predicts that the ratio could reach nearly a quarter by 2030 if the company's chip shipment doubles. Now, this makes the company's power supply a critical issue, especially as Taiwan phases out nuclear power and struggles to ramp up renewable energy sources. Now, to secure its energy future, TSMC has taken several proactive steps, and the company has invested heavily in self-generated power. It has built its own backup power systems to ensure its fabs continue operating even in the event of power disruptions. It also purchases large amounts of renewable energies. Now, despite these efforts, Taiwan's energy grid still faces challenges. The island remains heavily dependent on fossil fuels, and the pace of renewable energy development hasn't kept up with demand. Now, this has led to concerns that power shortages could still disrupt operations, not just for TSMC, but for Taiwan's economy and global technology supply chains. Now, for TSMC, securing a steady energy supply isn't just a local issue, it's a global issue with far-reaching consequences for the tech world.
And Vic, in terms of Taiwan's long-term energy security, with nuclear power out of the way, how is it looking in the future?
Well, despite having to miss its 2025 target for renewable energy at 20%, Taiwan is now aiming to achieve 30% of green energy by 2030. But many remain skeptical because they point out that one of the biggest challenges is scaling up the renewable energies. Unlike nuclear and fossil fuels, solar and wind are dependent on the weather, and that's not all. Let's now have a listen to what the analyst has to say.
那一个主要的原因呢，就是台湾地狭人稠啊。 那每平方公里呢大概640个人啊。那这个是平，但是台湾有2/3是山地啊，在平地更拥挤啊。算一算呢，大概平地来讲，每平方公里大概接近2000人啊，是非常拥挤的啊。那所以在这种情况之下，你比个例子，太阳光电我们要大量的装设的话，现在是主力了哈。那它就需要土地啊。那需要土地的话，就会跟农业的用地、渔业的用地就会冲突了，那就会造成一些环保团体的抗议跟民间的抗议啊。那这个是一个大问题。
Taiwan's dependency on imported fossil fuels like coal and natural gas is also a major risk. If global energy prices rise or if there are disruptions to supply chains, Taiwan's energy security could be compromised. Taiwan has set an ambitious target to reach net zero emission by 2050. But achieving that without nuclear energy means Taiwan will need a diverse and reliable mix of green technology, energy efficiency improvement, and smarter grid management. Now, without these steps, Taiwan's long-term energy security may be in limbo, making the transition away from nuclear power a delicate and critical balancing act.
Hey, many thanks for that report and all the interviews you've done as well. CNA's Victoria Jen in Taipei.